Dreams Talk Radio, After Dark, wants to give a big shout out to all the truckers that listen to our show.
You're listening to my friend Gary Anderson on My Dreams Talk Radio, the best in paranormal radio.
Now, John, I told you, we're not the best, but we're definitely on the radio. We got Judie Fein on here. We're going to be talking about her new book. It's now hitting out, How to Communicate with the Dead. Hi, Judie.
Hello.
Well, we're back.
Okay, we're back. Part 2, Part 3.
And I told you I'm easy to talk to. I noticed at the start when we were, chatting back and forth by emails, I think you were a little nervous. There's nothing to be nervous about, is there?
Well, not nervous, but I was thinking, God, 90 minutes is a long interview. But you know what? It's not an interview. You carry on a conversation. That's it. Much better.
Well, that's what I do. A lot of people, will send me these big, long questions to ask them. I don't do that. Like I said, I've been doing talk radio.
You're doing conversation. That's being a human. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk and interview people like they're sitting in my front room and we're having a beer or a glass of wine and we just talk.
Yeah, sounds good to me. I want to give a little mea culpa. If I'm hacking, it's because the allergies are so bad in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I live. So have compassion. It's ragweed and chamisa and everything else. So everybody's clearing their throats all the time.
Well, if you hear me cough, I got a kill button here. I've been hitting it about every 3 minutes. I got a cold because, the weather here has changed drastically, and it's chilly.
Yeah.
Anyway,
well,
I want to talk about your new book, How Do You Communicate, or How to Communicate with the Dead. How did you come up with that title? And, talk a little bit about that, and tell the listeners what made you decide to write this book.
Okay, because the subtitle of the book is called How to Communicate with the Dead and How Cultures Do It Around the World. So I'm a travel journalist, and for 20 years, I've been going around the world writing stories for magazines, newspapers, and giving talks. I gave a TED Talk on deep travel, and I've been doing this for a long time. I just love to travel, and I figured out how to do it to make that my work. And every time we arrive someplace, it would be very exotic, or it could be, someplace in the States, I would always say, can I get invited to a life cycle ceremony of some kind, like a birth or a marriage or a funeral? And I started realizing that ours is the only culture I know of where people think death is the end. And, I'm not a woo-woo person. I'm very interested in things beyond the normal. The normal is boring to me. And I have had experiences, and I wanted to write about in the book. So I would say I blog for Psychology Today. So about 5 years ago, I wrote an article called, something like How to Communicate with the Dead, and 330,000 people read it. And I was contacted with emails from people from every country you can name from the United States, people who had never spoken to anyone about it, and they had lost someone, they'd had a loss, they were grieving, or they had a relationship that was unsatisfying, they wanted to find a solution to it. And I said, okay, I have to write a book with more of this. And why was I qualified to do this? When I was 20 years old, my father died horribly. He was 50 years old. He was never sick a day in his life, and he had a horrible death. And I was freaked out. I was just really freaked out. I didn't exactly have an easy situation at home. And I used to go to the cemetery, and I would just visit the tomb, my father's, gravesite, and I would just find comfort. I don't know. I just went there, and I didn't know what else to do. I was so miserable, and no one I knew had lost a parent. So one day, I'm at the gravesite, and I hear somebody talking to me, a male voice, and I turned around. There was no one there, and I was such a grounded person. I wasn't open to things like I am now. And I freaked out, and I called up my older sister, and I said, I just heard Daddy speaking to me. And she said, yeah, it's because you're open. And I have had so many experiences now, but experiences with cultures, if I told you, your hair would stand up on end. They're really exciting and unusual and vivid and alive, but every solitary culture thinks that death is not the end. And so I learned how there are several kinds of communication you can have with the dead. There's spontaneous, like that's what happened to me. I'm 20 years old, and I'm at the grave site, and I hear a voice speaking to me, and it's my father. And then there are ways that you can initiate it. And I write about all of this in the book, but the first half of the book is taking you with me around the world so you can experience what I have experienced. And most of these things are not known. You know, they're beyond they're paranormal, and they're very, very alive, and they're absolutely central to these cultures. And I wrote the first half of the book so that people, come with me for an adventure. It doesn't cost you anything. You don't need a passport. Come along. And hopefully I write in a style that's, just come with me. And I write about many different countries and many different cultures and what it's like. How do they communicate with the dead? How do they keep their relationship going with the dead? And then in the second half of the book, I actually tell people how to do it. I tell them different ways, and they may already be doing it, but they don't know they're doing it. And I said, I'm breaking a shield of silence because I didn't speak about this before. And I can't believe the response. It's just out now. I'm doing a book launch November 1st, so the book is just available now. You can get it on Amazon. And it's in an ebook form, and it's in paperback. And the response, I sent it to a very high-power psychologist. I sent it to all different people, to religious leaders, to all different kind of people, to see what they thought. And the endorsements have been amazing, have been really strong. It's a very upbeat book, but I watch people suffering. They have loss. Everybody's got loss. And many people grew up in families, where a parent is now deceased or a sibling, and they had no resolution to the relationship. And I just wanted to do something about it, and I wanted to make it entertaining and interesting and exotic and supernatural, because it is. But it's also absolutely normal. And we have a death-phobic country. When I tell people usually the names of my books, they say, oh, I want to read it. When I say how to communicate with the dead and how cultures do it around the world, I see people turn white.
And I laugh.
Because, hey, it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. This is how you communicate with the dead. And one day when you die, this is how you can communicate with the living. And I was interviewed by a local publication here, the main newspaper. And I was asked many times, so what is your faith? Excuse me again, allergy land. What is your belief? And I said, this is not about belief. This is not about faith. This is what I have experienced with many, many cultures around the world. I'm a journalist. I'm not flaky. This is really what it's like. So today, I went to a Tai Chi class. I'm taking a Tai Chi class. It's really wonderful. And after the class, some of the people were sitting around. And one of them said to me, oh, I heard about your new book. And I said, how to communicate with the dead and how cultures do it around the world. And all of a sudden they opened up. And each one of them had an experience with communicating with the dead, but they'd never talked about it. So that's why I wrote the book, and I have had many, many experiences. Some are funny, some are crazy, but all of them expand the notion of what's possible. And this thing called death is not the end. And that I know like I know my name.
Well, you hit it on, because, even in my situation, this might sound strange, but I had a little dog for 20 years, part poodle, part terrier, and it was blind the last 2 years of its life and actually had to wear diapers. But it's still totally functional, and when it passed on for about a month, I swear to God, that dog, because it slept in our bed, I could feel it in our bed at night, creeping forward up towards the pillow.
You're totally plugged in. In one section of the book, I included excerpts from letters that people have written me, and at least I think about 2 of them are about pets, exactly that they have had communication from pets after the pets die. You know, your listeners are already interested in paranormal things, in expanding the notion of what's possible. And when you take it out of the realm of belief and faith and superstition and woo-woo, it's just the way it is. And I want to tell people how it's done around the world and how they can do it. It's an expansion of your life.
I'm trying to think of the one culture that, the dead, every year they go clean the bones and polish the bones and put it back and put food offerings. I can't.
Okay, I experienced that in Mexico. Actually, it was in a place called Campeche. It's outside of a town named Campeche. It's a fabulous area. And the ancient Maya, I went to a cemetery in a town called Pamuch, and in this cemetery, every year, first of all, a person is buried, and after about 3 years, the flesh has disappeared. And they go and they get their ancestors' bones, and they clean them. Every year they clean them, they make sure that they're nice and white, and then they put them in niches in the cemetery. I mean, I write about this, but in niches in the cemetery. And each niche, it has kind of hand-lettered the name of the person who died, and inside is a box. Inside each niche is a box with their grandmother's bones or their father's bones or their mother's bones or their great-grandmother's bones. And you can see them. The boxes are not closed. So you walk through the cemetery and you see, Grandpa's skull and your aunt's rib cage and your deceased father's leg bone. You see them. And people come there. The Maya people come every day. They go shopping. They have their shopping bags. They come into the cemetery. They put them down. And they talk. Ma, here's what's happening to me, or Dad, this is what's going on, or Grandma, I really miss you, and something bad happened to me today. And they converse, and the bones are there. You can walk to the cemetery, and you see the cleaned bones of their ancestors, and it's just part of their life.
And they're in Mexico, too. There's places where they actually have the bodies basically up on the wall, mummified pretty much, where, again, their, relatives can go, say the same thing, go and see them and communicate with them.
But it's really, now, the Maya civilization, for example, is thousands of